Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you were watching first part of What If Naruto Was Forgotten Son of Minato. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
6 years after the Kyuubi attack, in Konoha, Naruto Pav. The Kyuubi had attacked Konoha 6 years before. The third Hokage had given his life to seal the Kyuubi within Shio Uzumaki, his twin sister. Many people believed that his life would be better if he wasn't an orphan, didn't have the Kyuubi, and didn't have the village's hatred. They would be mistaken. Naruto Uzumaki had spent the previous 6 years of his life being neglected and gradually forgotten by his parents. It used to be trivial things like forgetting to call him for dinner, ignoring his advice when going out, and never tucking him into bed at night. However, the neglect became worse over time. His parents began to neglect him more and more, eventually forgetting his birthday. People in the village seemed to forget he was their Hokage's son and treated him like any other faceless orphan child. He began to truly raise himself after his forgotten 5th birthday. He began reading books on ninja basics and cooking his own meals at odd hours to avoid interacting with his family. He studied the fundamentals non-stop to prepare for the academy at the age of 8. He knew he couldn't rely on his parents to train him. If he couldn't rely on them to remember his birthday, how could he rely on them to train him? He was aware that they had begun training Shio at the age of 5. When he asked them to assist him in training, they simply looked at him and said he'd be trained at the academy and Shio needed extra help controlling the Kyuubi. At that point, he had lost all faith in his parents and began to avoid referring to them as such in his mind. He eventually began to leave the estate and train independently. He quickly discovered he had a talent for chakra control after mastering the basic leaf sticking exercise on his 4th attempt. He eventually improved to the point where he could stick more than 10 leaves to his body at once. He was aware, however, that he would require more instruction than just basic scrolls. He soon began sneaking into Minato's library and stealing numerous scrolls on the fundamentals. As he completed more chakra control exercises, he discovered that, unlike his mother and sister, he did not have an excess of chakra. He still had an above-average level for his age, as expected of any Uzumaki, but not excessively so. He was reading about a specific exercise known as tree walking. There were no trees large enough in the estate to really learn the exercise, so he excited the gate and went to the Uzumaki estate's surrounding forest. He packed a backpack full of necessities, including a change of clothes, food, kunai, shuriken, a bedroll, and jutsu scrolls from Minato's private library. He intended to sleep outside tonight and get away from the estate. After all, they wouldn't remember him anyway. He arrived at his usual training clearing and got to work. He'd kidnapped some useful jutsu from Minato. He had stolen the instructions for the following techniques: Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, Water Walking, Tree Walking, Kawamari no Jutsu, Henge no Jutsu, Bushin no Jutsu, and a stolen Suna scroll on how to make chakra strings. He had also discovered some of Tsunade's medical jutsu training scrolls. He assumed it was a present from Minato that he never used. He was aware that some of the jutsu were beyond his current abilities. He had barely enough chakra to make one Kage Bushin. But he discovered that by using just one Kage Bushin, he could train twice as fast while also increasing his reserves. He already knew what he wanted to specialize in during his ninja career. He would specialize in whatever Minato and Kushina were bad at. He is well aware that Minato and Kushina are terrible at medical arts, genjutsu, and poisons. He only wished Tsunade hadn't left the village after healing Kushina from the Kyuubi extraction. Though he doubted Tsunade would want to teach him, he suspected she would focus on Shio like Jiraiya and Kakashi. He quickly began working on tree climbing. He knows that if he can master tree climbing, he can theoretically master any jutsu, or so it says in the description. He discovered that tree climbing was not difficult after several attempts. He wasn't sure if it was due to the difficulty of the exercise or if he simply had good chakra control. He practiced tree walking for several hours, gradually becoming able to walk up the tree without much concentration. He was completely exhausted after the 50th repetition of the exercise. He knew it was because of his inherited Uzumaki stamina that he had lasted so long. He decided to go to the library while drinking some water, a place of solace for him when the neglect gets too much. He wished to read some medical textbooks in order to begin his medical education as soon as possible. He hoped to be able to treat minor wounds by the time he entered the academy. He walks into the library and smiles at the elderly librarian. Yui Haruka, the librarian, is a retired chunin from the village, with graying brownish hair and large thick glasses, and she looked like any other ordinary grandmother. Naruto's friend since he first came here at the age of 5. She was one of the few villagers who paid attention to him. He made his way silently to the medical section. Many of the more advanced books were safely stored at the hospital, but many books explaining basic medical practices were left in the library for aspiring students. For civilian students, the library also had a large selection of anatomy, botany, biology, and science textbooks. Naruto demonstrated his prodigious intellect by comprehending the medical texts. He had already made a Kage Bushin and had read a book on human anatomy while he read the basics of medical chakra after recovering enough chakra. According to the book, medical chakra is purified spiritual energy. This pure spiritual energy enters the target's dead or dying cells and reactivates them, quickly healing the target. To use these techniques, however, one must have excellent chakra control and mental focus because an excess of medical chakra can kill cells rather than heal them. The book mentioned some famous chakra healing applications, such as Tsunade's legendary strength achieved by separating her chakra into spiritual and physical energy. He decided that one of his long-term goals would be to recreate Tsunade's strength. He looked out the window and realized it was getting late, and the library was about to close. He let go of his clone and closed his eyes to take in the information from his double. The clone appeared to have discovered all of the body's pressure points, the 7 critical points, and what the chakra system looks like in the human body. It was quite interesting. He returned to his spot in the woods and fell asleep after a light meal of bread and cheese. The following day, 6 a.m. Village Forest. Naruto awoke to find the sky dark and cloudy. It was almost certainly going to rain. He quickly packed his belongings into his pack and dashed back to the estate, hoping to avoid the rain. He was about to open the gate when he noticed something was wrong with it. It refused to open. He yanked harder on the gate, becoming slightly desperate. It remained firmly shut. His eyes widened as he tried to figure out why the gate wouldn't open. It was October 1st. Minato redrew the estate seals at the end of each month. The chakra signature of one of the seals determined who was allowed into the estate. Minato had to have forgotten to add him to the defenses. He knew Minato would be in his office soon, and Kushina would be preparing breakfast for Shio. He stood there silently for a few minutes as it began to rain. He looked up to see that it was starting to rain, drenching him. He realized he had been completely forgotten by the Namikaze family. He was perplexed as to why this information hurt him so much. He was aware that this day would come. He had been preparing for his parents' abandonment since his 5th birthday. He'd stocked up on non-perishable food in a cave near the glade where he trains for at least 2 years. As he stood in the rain, his rage and hatred for the family grew. He wouldn't beg or yell at that man to let him back in. He didn't care that he no longer had any resources or support from his family. He resolved to exact vengeance on his former family. He was well aware that achieving this goal would be nearly impossible. The Namikaze Uzumaki family was well liked throughout the Fireland. The daimyo adored Minato and would never say anything negative about him. He also knew that when Shio arrived at the academy, no one would say anything negative about her. He didn't care. He was out for vengeance in any way he could. In his opinion, the only way to do so was to outperform Shio. If he could outperform Shio, he could show everyone in the village that he didn't deserve to be forgotten. That he was just as important as Kohona's princess. He began walking back to the forest, knowing he needed to find shelter from the rain. He was aware of a cave nearby the glade where he could seek refuge. He could figure out what to do once the rain stopped. 7 a.m., hidden cave. He used chakra control exercises to dry his clothes and body from the rain while resting inside the cave. He had rarely entered this cave because he had never felt the need to. The cave was the ideal hiding place. The natural formation of the trees and shrubbery effectively concealed the entrance, and a rock formation surrounding the cave concealed it even further. But now that it was his home for the foreseeable future, he decided to investigate. As he walked deeper into the cave, he noticed that the floor was becoming smoother and the walls were becoming more box-shaped. He eventually came to a steel door that had become slightly rusted with age. He attempted to open the door, but it was shut. He used a technique he learned from repeatedly breaking into Minato's library. He wound a small chakra string around his finger and inserted it into the lock. He began to pump chakra into the string, which expanded into the shape of a key. As he turned it slowly, he heard a click and the door opened inward. The inside room resembled an abandoned laboratory, with jars of animal parts, preserved plants, and a variety of other unknown objects. He looked around some more and discovered a desk next to a distilling station with a journal on it. He began to read the first few pages. 5th of January. I recently discovered a cave that will be ideal for my poison and medical research. I'll be able to begin my path to power here. Orochimaru, the snake Sanin. The 10th of January. I've started testing on small animals brought to me by my snakes. Many of my poisons remain too messy. I've started experimenting with various venoms and plants in order to create the perfect poison. Tuesday, February 2nd. I finished it. I've created the ideal poison. After a few minutes, the poison is completely undetectable for several hours before the animals die from a heart attack. I'm not sure if the outcome will have the same impact on humans. I don't want to be found out by bringing in local bandits to this laboratory. Perhaps some of the children of the village's civilians can help me with my projects. In shock, Naruto nearly dropped the journal after discovering one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories. He learned about the snake Sanin from Minato's library. He'd read about the atrocities this man had committed against Kohona's citizens. However, as he stared at the journal, he realized that this could be the key to giving him the upper hand over Shio. He is aware that Shio will be tutored by at least 4 cage-level ninjas. Shio will most likely be a high Chunin level by the time she graduates, even more so if she proves to be a prodigy like her father. He understands that in order to beat her, he must have a significant advantage. This laboratory could provide an advantage. But could he bring himself to accept tutoring, even if only indirectly, from one of the elemental nation's most monstrous missing nin? He read more passages in the journal, all of which described horrific experiments and poisons that could kill anyone. He reflected on how far he was willing to go for vengeance. He looked around the lab, seeing all of the tools he could use if he chose this dark path. He began to recall all of the times his family had abandoned him. He remembered his family leaving him at home while they went to the Kyuubi festival. He remembered watching his family eat dinner together and laughing as a family. He remembered watching from his window as Minato and Kushina started Shio's training, completely forgetting about him. He finally remembered him standing in the rain, forgotten and abandoned. Naruto looked around the lab again, seeing instructions for high-level poison making, high-level medical techniques, chemistry sets, gas masks, syringes, and then he looked to the far wall where 3 practice dummies were kept and imagined his family's faces on them, never looking at him and treating him like a stranger, and his hatred grew even stronger. He looked down at the journal in his hand and accepted that he was going down this dark path. He went to the door and shut it. "I'm going to lock it from the inside." And when he came out of the laboratory, he would be a different person. Konoha's hidden laboratory, 5 months after the start of training. Naruto was completely obsessed. He'd learned a lot in the 5 months since he started studying in the laboratory. He had learned almost all of the basic poisons from the ingredients he could find in the nearby forest. He had worked tirelessly on chakra control through tree walking and water walking exercises. He could now summon 3 shadow clones to train alongside him. 1 shadow clone would focus on chakra control, while the other 2 would continue their studies in medicine and poison. He was done with Orochimaru's journal. He was completely disgusted by some of Orochimaru's experiments. He would apparently experiment on humans and record their reactions to his poisons. After the first chapter, he discovered how to avoid nausea. However, he kept telling himself that he needed to continue on this path in order to fulfill his revenge dream. After a few months of studying Orochimaru's poisons, he was almost relieved that Orochimaru had completed his experiments before being forced to leave Konoha. His effort is to his advantage. His poisons appeared to have more applications than just killing. He appeared to categorize his poisons into 3 types: fatal, non-fatal, and other uses. His lethal poisons were among the most potent. Poisons that kill you immediately to poisons that can remain docile for days before killing the target. His non-fatal poisons were extremely diverse. The effects ranged from drafts of sleep to bottled insanity, think the berserker poison from AC. Some of the poisons even had the opposite effect of poisons and appeared to heal the drinker. He wondered if those poisons should be classified as elixirs instead. The other effects section piqued his interest the most. The section appeared to be about enhancing one's body by poisoning oneself. Some of the poisons, however, had severe side effects. After the effects wore off, one even turned the body into a mummified husk. He decided not to experiment with any of these poisons until he had a much stronger body, mind, and chakra control. The journal mentioned that poisoning oneself with minor venoms on a regular basis could help negate poisoning oneself. His indirect sensei wrote that it would aid in immune system development. He quickly discovered, however, that most minor poisons had almost no effect on him. He assumed this was because he was half Uzumaki. Taking advantage of this genetic trait, he constantly poisoned himself with minor to medium-level poisons, gradually increasing his resistance to various venoms. He had also discovered several sealing books in the laboratory. He had long considered learning the art because it was Minato's specialty. However, after reviewing some of Orochimaru's greatest works, he realized that he would need a solid foundation in sealing to complete them. Such as the legendary curse seals mentioned briefly in the journal. 5 months had already passed in the laboratory before he realized it. He had mastered the majority of the fundamentals of being a ninja. His chakra control possessed a high genin level. His medical knowledge was sufficient to treat most minor wounds. He had learned to make many of the basic to medium poisons listed in the various texts left behind by Orochimaru. However, he recognizes that the fundamentals were insufficient and that he needed to learn more advanced techniques to defeat his sister. 5 months after Naruto left, Namikaze Uzumaki Estate, Konoha, Shio Pav. Shio had learned a lot from her 4 teachers. She had already begun learning the fundamentals of Kenjutsu, chakra control, hand seals, and sealing. Despite the positive attention she received from the villagers and her parents, she was not spoiled. If she acted like a spoiled clan heiress, her Ka-san would murder her. Nonetheless, she acted arrogantly around other children. She had every right to be arrogant because she was superior to them. Her two-san had introduced her to a new chakra control exercise, the tree walking exercise, the day before. She was having a lot of trouble finishing it. Her two-san always said it was due to her large chakra reserves. But she was already halfway up the tree. She's sure no one has ever completed this exercise faster. She is confident that by the time she is ready for the academy, she will be super strong. She'd crush all of the other students on her way to becoming Hokage. Datbeo. Forest of Death, Konoha, 1 year and 5 months after training began, Naruto POV. It had been a year since Naruto had mastered the fundamentals. He'd grown a little and was now 7.5 years old. He had changed a lot in a year. Because of his lack of sleep and exposure to so many poisons, his eyes had lost their pupils. I'm not sure if this is possible, but so many Naruto characters don't have pupils, so I assume this is the cause, and his hair had turned from a sunny blonde to an almost white color. His hair had gradually lost its signature spikiness due to careful combing, and he had grown his hair in 2 long bangs on the side of his face with a short ponytail. He was now dressed in a fur-lined hooded coat, black shinobi pants, a black medical wrap around his arms, and dark green shinobi sandals. To carry all of his supplies, he carried a satchel with storage seals. It's a satchel, not a purse. He also wore a gas mask loosely around his neck, which served almost as a face mask because it covered half of his face. His blood was extremely toxic as a result of his numerous poison injections. He discovered this when he cut himself and the blood fell on a rat he was experimenting with. The rat began convulsing suddenly and died several minutes later. He had also discovered that his blood had turned a pure black color as a result of the toxins in it. In the village, he had developed a new identity. He identified himself as an orphan named Menma. He had also enrolled in the academy. He considered simply leaving the village, but he had nowhere else to go. Iwa would rather kill him than allow him to join their community. Kumo planned to put him in a breeding program. Suna had a friendship with the Leaf. And he didn't want to think about Kiri while their civil war was still going on. Furthermore, how could he exact revenge on the Namikaze family if he was in a different village? In the present, however, he was in the Forest of Death looking for rare plants needed for his latest poison. The Forest of Death was named for a reason, but because of the toxin in his blood, most predators avoided him because they could smell that he was dangerous and inedible. He jumped back as a kunai flew past him into the ground as he continued to walk into a clearing full of nightshade, a beautiful purple plant that looks like lavender, but is 10 times more deadly. He drew a scalpel and injected some medical chakra into it to make it easier to cut. He was preparing for a fight when he heard a mocking female voice laugh, "Hee hee hee hee. Is the Ickle Gaki interested in playing with me? The Gaki isn't supposed to be here." "Who are you?" "The gate was open when I arrived at this forest, so I assumed it was allowed," Naruto said in his usual monotone voice, looking around cautiously. True. The side gate to the forest was wide open when he was attempting to break in. Anko Mitarashi's sweat dropped from her treetop hideout because she had forgotten to lock the gate before entering the forest. But she wasn't about to let any Gaki respond to her. She quickly shushed behind the Gaki and pointed a kunai at his cheek, aiming for creepiness factor 10. She said seductively, menacingly in his ear, "Gaki, my name is Mitarashi Anko, and you should remember it. Now tell me who you are and why you are in this forest, which is normally only for Chunins and Jonins." Mitarashi Anko is the name of Orochimaru's apprentice in the village, and Naruto's eyes widened slightly. If he played his cards correctly, this could go either way. He made the decision to be at least partially truthful. My name is Menma, and I'm looking for rare plants to help me with my research. Anko deadpans at the 7-year-old and raises the creepiness factor to 11 by summoning a snake to scare the child, chuckling. You're telling me that some brat like you goes into the forest of death to find some plants for a science project? Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as he began to explain what he was looking for. I'm looking for some nightshade to mix with the venom of the poisonous tree leaves that are commonly found in this forest. Anko remarked on the potency of the venom. And what would a gaki like you want with a poison that could kill a grown man in a matter of seconds? It's for my fighting style. I'm training in poisons and medical jutsu, he said with a slight smile. Anko's eyes widened slightly as he learned this. He was studying poisons and medical jutsu? Those two areas were among the most undervalued aspects of being a ninja. Most people were only interested in flashy ninjutsu or fancy taijutsu. When she looked at the young prodigy, her eyes glowed a little. Her creepiness factor rose to 12 as she licked her lips and stared at Naruto like a predator. As he looked into Anko's eyes, he began to feel a little nervous. He'd heard that she was a little crazy around the village. Well, I'll go, he said nervously as he began to back away slowly. He gulped nervously as he began to walk away, feeling a hand clamp down on his head. A shadowed Anko stands behind him, giggling creepily. Hehehe, well gaki, if you want to be a poison user you can't find a better sensei than me. Most people didn't realize that Anko always wanted a student to teach her arts to. She wished to give a student the opportunity to succeed that Orochimaru took away from her when he abandoned her with the curse mark. So prepare yourself, gaki, because you will be overseen by the great and sexy Mitarashi Anko until you graduate from the academy. She dragged him back into the woods, laughing the whole time. Naruto's only thought was, how did getting caught in the forest of death lead to this? The Konoha Academy, initiation ceremony for all new and returning students. Anko training senseis was a torture. Interesting experience. He thought he had trained hard before, but Anko's training was unrivaled. She trained him by playing games with him. Outrun the giant snake before it eats you, identify the hidden poison in all of your food, avoid the kunai, and don't get caught or you'll be stabbed. But he can't argue with the results. His situational awareness had grown exponentially. He could now be aware of his surroundings at all times, even while sleeping. Anko also assisted him with his toxic blood problem. She explained that it was a side effect of attempting to build up one's immune system too quickly. She taught him a jutsu that detoxified his blood when he wasn't fighting and increased its potency when he was. She also taught him the Hubby combat style, which worked well with his chakra scalpels and poisons. The Hubby style was similar to the Hyuga's gentle fist, except instead of injecting chakra into one's opponent, the user injects poison into the opponent through the user's attacks. The style also taught him to be extremely adaptable in order to get past someone's defenses. Despite the harsh training, they grew to be good friends. He revealed his true ancestry to Anko near the end of their training. First reminiscence. It was the last day of training, and they were both relaxing in one of the Forest of Death's large branches. Anko had brought them some sake and dango to share, one stick of dango for Naruto and the rest for Anko. Naruto was debating whether or not to reveal his ancestry to Anko. During their training, she had earned his broken trust, and he felt slightly guilty for lying to her. He sighed and started explaining to Anko, "Hey Anko, I just wanted to let you know that I haven't been completely honest with you. I am the forgotten son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki." Anko laughed at Menma, his alias, and said, "Ha ha ha, yeah, good one gaki." She laughed briefly until she noticed his serious expression and frowned. "Wait, you're serious?" Naruto nodded and began to tell her his life story, from being abandoned by his parents to discovering the laboratory, he did not say who had previously owned it, to the present. She was taken aback at first, then became thoughtful for a moment. "I don't get it. I've seen the Hokage's family, and they appear to be the ideal family. Even as a master of psychology, I know that parents do not abandon one child over another for something as trivial as training one sibling. Menma frowned. He had read some psychology books and his parents had not acted like normal parents. He pushed those thoughts aside and returned to his thoughts of vengeance, commenting bitterly, "I guess they are the exception and they just didn't want a son." Anko comforted Menma by patting her shoulder and saying, "Well, it appears that we both had bad childhoods, so our training is over for the time being, and the academy will begin soon. I know you don't need it, but best wishes, Gaki." She poofed away in a shushin, carrying the last of the dango with her. Flashback concludes. He sighed and began to walk into the academy's entrance, ready to finally prove to his family that he is not worthless. Konoha Academy, Menma's point of view. The academy's opening ceremony is a long-standing tradition for both shinobi and civilian families. It was an opportunity to meet the teachers, scout potential talent, and listen to the Hokage's speech. Adults usually gathered around the teachers, asking questions and going over the curriculum with their children. The older students congregated in their pre-established groups, while the younger students met new people and formed new friendships. Menma wandered around the festivities, slightly bored. He wasn't here to meet new people or mingle with other students. He wouldn't have bothered to attend the ceremony if it wasn't required of all new students. As 10 o'clock approached, everyone took their seats to hear the Hokage speak. Menma glared at Minato as he took the stage. He hadn't changed in the 2 years since he'd last seen him. Minato looked around at his classmates as he continued his speech about the will of fire and protecting the village. At least one member of each major clan appeared to be present. He even spotted the elusive Kurama clan heiress among the attendees. He'd heard of the girl. She'd apparently awakened a special bloodline that made her illusions come true at the expense of creating a separate personality. However, thanks to the quick actions of Kushina and Minato, the alternate personality was sealed and she was able to become a shinobi. He sighed as Minato's speech ended and they were all called in for the academy's first day. The teacher began rambling on about the will of fire and the grand history of Konoha as they took their seats. He sighed, knowing that the next 4 years would be difficult. Konoha Academy, 4 years after Menma started the academy. It had been 4 years since Menma founded the academy. It had been a fantastic waste of time for the majority of the day. He didn't, however, complain. He understands that the academy is required to join the ninja ranks. For years, he hadn't changed his clothes much. He was now dressed in a tan trench coat, a gift from Anko, a gas mask around his neck, a black muscle shirt and Anbu-style pants, and regular shinobi sandals. To the chagrin of all the clan children, he was the rookie of the year for all 4 years. People were comparing him to Minato, who was also an orphaned rookie of the year. During the academy, he had not demonstrated all of his abilities, instead establishing himself as a rising prodigy as a med nin and poison specialist. He had revealed Anko's training in order to conceal the skills he did possess. Neji Hyuga, a boy who kept telling him that his success was fate and that he was destined to be Rookie of the Year, is right behind him. Yes, he did not become friends with Neji. He did, however, make a few friends during his time at the academy. He'd made acquaintances with Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kurama was the year's kunoichi, while Rock Lee came in dead last. By reviewing previous graduating classes, he had already determined that these were to be his future teammates. Every year, the Rookie and Kunoichi of the Year joined forces with the dead last.
He assumed that as a taijutsu specialist, a genjutsu specialist, and a medical poison expert, they balanced each other out.
What he didn't realize was that a team meeting was taking place in the Hokage's office right now. Hokage's office, Minato's point of view. All of the potential Jonin senseis were present, along with the Hokage and Academy teachers, as they reviewed the year's graduates. We have 30 potential graduates this year. I am glad the Academy curriculum has produced so many potential ninjas. Minato cleared his throat and began the meeting. The Academy professors were overjoyed that they could teach the next generation. Let's begin with Team 1. They briefly discussed the teams and matched personalities until they reached Team 9. We now have a team that includes the Rookie of the Year, the Kunoichi of the Year, and the Dead Last. The teachers nodded, and Iruka Amino stepped forward with the 3 students' bios and information. First and foremost, Rock Lee is a dedicated student who lacks the ability to use chakra to produce major ninjutsu or genjutsu. He can perform the basic 3 Academy jutsu and use chakra to strengthen his body, but that's about it. However, he is a dedicated student and aspiring taijutsu master under the tutelage of Maida Guy, who has been training the boy since the Academy's 2nd year. He flipped through the pages of his folder. Yakumo Kurama, the Kunoichi of the Year, is a genjutsu prodigy on par with the missing nin Itachi Uchiha. She lacks taijutsu but excels at ranged weaponry, especially when combined with her illusions. He turned to the last page. Finally, Menma, an orphan who has proven to be a prodigy in poisons and medical ability, is the Rookie of the Year. During his academy years, he worked part-time at the hospital, and the only thing keeping him from becoming an active medic is his age and lack of Chunin status. He is also an expert in taijutsu using the Anko-san's fighting style. He previously stated that he had private training with Anko. Except for the Kunoichi in question, everyone shivered at the news. Iruka placed the folder on the Hokage's desk, while Minato read through the information on the 3 students. Menma piqued his interest. As an orphan himself, he understood how difficult it was to make it to Rookie of the Year without any assistance. He appears to have had a similar relationship with Anko as he did with Jiraiya. He looked up as the team senseis finished debating who would be the best sensei for them. Anko and Guy both took a step forward, and Anko spoke solemnly. "I'd like to be sensei of this team." With Menma's poison skills, Lee's taijutsu skills, and Yakumo's genjutsu abilities, they'd make an excellent assassination and escort team. Guy began to speak as she took a step back. "I would like to continue privately tutoring Rock Lee in taijutsu. I don't doubt Anko's ability to teach him, but he already knows the strong fist fighting style." This information was processed by Minato. It was a good idea because Anko had prior experience with Menma and the other 2 could benefit from Anko as well. Guy's insistence on training Rock Lee would not cause him to be neglected. He nodded and stamped his approval on the team. Accepted, Menma, Rock Lee, and Yakumo Kurama will form Team 9. Anko Mitarashi will be the team's sensei. The teachers and future senseis all nodded and exited the room. Minato frowned and lowered his gaze to Menma's page. He was curious about Menma. What were the chances that an orphan, like his daughter, Shio, would be named after a ramen ingredient? And why did he feel guilty every time he looked at Menma's face? What no one else knew was that a large fox chuckled to himself behind the bars of a large cage in a sewer as he watched Shio Uzumaki's eyes and waited to see the outcome of its interference. Kahona Academy, Menma's point of view. Menma sat next to Yakumo and Lee, waiting for the teacher to announce the teams. Iruka Amino soon entered the room, took out a sheet of paper, and began listing the teams. 1 to 8 are unimportant. Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma will make up Team 9. Mitarashi Anko will be your sensei. As Yakumo and Lee cheered, Menma smiled slightly. Neji Hyuga, Tenten, and Mito Gecko will make up Team 10. Hayate Gecko will be your sensei. Iruka placed his papers on the table and smiled at all of the graduates. "I've had the pleasure of serving as your sensei for the past few years. I hope everyone's dreams come true and that everyone's determination never wanes." Iruka was about to continue when a canopy smashed through the window, securing 2 kunais to the blackboard. The sexy and single Mitarashi Anko, sensei of Team 9. Read the canopy. Anko stood at the bottom of the canopy, striking a dramatic pose, saying, "Alright all you gakis, I want to see Team 9 up on the roof in 5 minutes." Soon after the announcement, she poofed into smoke, leaving the entire room stunned for a few seconds before Team 9 stood up and made their way up to the roof. From the academy roof, Menma Pav. When the trio arrived on the roof, Anko was munching on some dango and grinning at them. "Alright you 3. Name your names, likes, dislikes, hobbies, future dreams, that sort of thing." Yukumo was taken aback by Anko's outfit, but he spoke respectfully. "Shouldn't you say hello first, sensei?" Anko smiled again, swallowed the rest of the dango, and began her introduction. "I'm Mitarashi Anko, the hot Mitarashi. Poisons, torture, blood, tea ceremonies, and my adorable little gakis are among my interests. A certain snake, bad dango, bad sake, and arrogant assholes are among my pet peeves. Working in the T&I division and hanging out in the Forest of Death are 2 of my hobbies. My ambition is to kill a specific snake. Gaki 1, it's your turn now." Yukumo was taken aback by the nickname, but he persisted. "Yukumo Karama is my name. Genjutsu, painting, and rice balls are among my interests. I dislike my alternate personality Ito, as well as a specific person. Painting and genjutsu are 2 of my hobbies. My ambition for the future is to be the elemental nation's best genjutsu user." Anko turned to face Lee. "How about you, big brows?" Lee jumped up and down and spoke quickly. "Yosh. Hello, my name is Rock Lee. Taijutsu, Gai Sensei, training, and curry are all things I enjoy. I don't have many dislikes, but I despise natural-born prodigies. My hobbies include training and cooking curry, and my ambition for the future is to outperform Gai Sensei as a taijutsu expert." Anko nodded and returned his attention to Menma. "How about you, Gas-kun?" Naruto smirked slightly at the moniker but said calmly, "My name is Menma, and I don't have a surname. Poisons, gardening, ramen, and books are among my interests. A certain family, people who look down on medic nin, and arrogant people are among my dislikes. My hobbies include gardening, training, and researching various poisons and their effects. I don't have a dream for the future, but rather an ambition to become the most skilled medic nin and poison user in the elemental nations." Anko gave them their first instructions while smiling broadly at their introductions. "Okay, then, my cute little gakis, we'll have the True Genin test at Training Field 9 tomorrow." "True Genin test, sensei?" Lee asked, perplexed. Lee was smirked at by Anko. "Of course, you didn't think that all it took to become a full-fledged genin was a written test and some basic jutsu. Meet me at the field at 8 a.m. If you're late, it's back to the academy." With those words, she vanished in a flurry of leaves. "I really need to learn that jutsu," Naruto thought as he looked at the jutsu. Naruto considered his potential teammates. "We need to be well rested for tomorrow, so go to bed early and eat a good breakfast." Knowing Anko-sensei, this test will not be easy. Yukumo and Lee nodded and went their separate ways, each thinking about and preparing for the test the next day. Menma's Pav, Training Ground 9 Kahona. The Genin Team 9 practiced on Training Ground 9 as was customary. It was a basic training field surrounded by dense forests, with an open field in the center serving as a training ground. Yukumo, Lee, and Naruto arrived at the training grounds just before 6:40 a.m. They'd all arrived a little early to prepare for the True Genin test. Naruto began the planning process. "Okay, I've known Sensei for quite some time. She is a versatile fighter who primarily employs stealth attacks to kill or injure her opponents. She has the power to summon snakes to help her in battle. She is also one of the village's few poison specialists, along with myself. Yakumo and Lee both nodded at the information, and Yakumo made a comment. I propose that we use the sensei information as a distraction. Lee will keep sensei distracted while I layer illusions and Menma finishes her off. Menma nodded at the sound strategy. It wouldn't work against a Jonin like Anko, but it was the best they had. Lee yelled as he raised his fist to the sky, Yosh! There is no way we can fail this test with the power of youth. Yakumo and Menma both sweat dropped, indicating that he had already been corrupted by Guy. He felt a chill, as if someone were walking on his grave. He quickly knocked his teammates back and used a scalpel to deflect the incoming kunai. He sighed, scowling, and spoke aloud to the woods. Do you have to throw kunai every time we get together, sensei? Anko smiled broadly in front of the group. Well, Gaki, it's good to see you haven't lost touch in the time we've been apart. If you had, I'd have to beat those abilities back into you. Menma shivered slightly, knowing she was serious. What is our test today, sensei? Anko became solemn and began to explain the test. I was planning to conduct a special test for you, Gakis. However, it is customary for the 2 rookies of the year and the last man standing to take the bell test. The purpose of this test is to take these bells away from me. The person who does not have any part of a bell will return to the academy, Anko explained. All 3 students tensed, despite the fact that there were only 2 bells. You have until noon, which is in 3 hours, you may begin. Anko said evilly. The 3 students all jumped into the nearby forest. Anko smirked as she looked around the forest. She may not be a censor like Kakashi, but... From behind, a green garden snake was staring at Menma. Yakumo was staring at a black snake. A blue snake peered out of the bushes at Lee. They can't get away from her snakes. Menma Pav, Training Ground 9 surrounding forest, 3 hours until test is over. He knew there had to be a trick to this test. He had looked through the Hokage's personal library for previous team rosters. There had never been a 3-person team unless it was for a double apprenticeship, which is uncommon. He remembered Anko's words, any part of a bell, and smirked, clever sensei, but not clever enough. He ran through the woods looking for his teammates. Lee Pav, Training Ground 9 open field, 2.45 hours until test is over. I dashed into the field to face our sensei. I'm not going to fail Guy Sensei and get a bell, or I'll do 500 laps around Konoha on my hands. Greetings Sensei, I will take one of those bells now. I said as I approached the field and took my stance in front of Anko Sensei. You're not very smart, Gaki, Anko exclaimed as he made his loud entrance. Lee dashed at his sensei at high chunin speeds and jumped in the air in a spinning kick, not responding. Whispering leaves. Anko easily deflected the kick and kicked Lee in the side as he passed, breaking his spin and tossing him away. Lee leapt to his feet and charged at Anko, about to punch her when she was replaced by a log. Kawamari? He wondered as he searched for his sensei. When he turned around, however, the log poofed and was replaced by Anko, who kicked him in the back into the woods. She chuckled quietly to herself. She never imagined that any idiot would confuse Kawamari for Henge. In another dimension, Naruto sneezed. She looked down at a snake in the grass, and it spoke to her.
Her grin widened as she realized her favorite Gaki would comprehend the test.
They only needed to get a bell from her now. Menma Pav, Training Ground 9, surrounding forest, 2 hours till test is over. He quickly found Yakumo, who was hiding nearby, and told her his theory about the test. She had believed him, and they had rushed to find Lee. They discovered him being kicked in the $1 by Anko Sensei. It was a good thing she was gentle with him. She had copied Kakashi's 100 Years of Pain with a kunai and explosive tags the last time he made a stupid mistake like that. They gathered Lee quickly and explained the situation to him. He quickly agreed that they needed to collaborate, and they began to devise a strategy. "We don't have time to make you too immune to my poisons, so wear those on your chest. They will filter out the air and prevent poison from entering your lungs," Menma said, handing them to his teammates. Yakumo examined Menma's gas mask and asked, "Why do you wear that if you have these tags, and when did you learn sealing?" Menma didn't even appear sheepish as he stated solemnly, "Wearing a sealing tag looks more badass. Furthermore, those tags do not last forever. These are only good for 2 hours at most. Anko-sensei taught me some sealing, a lie, but they didn't need to know. These anti-poison seals must be carried by any poison user." They both nodded and began their plan. Training Ground 9. Open field, Anko's point of view. 1 hour until the test is completed. When 3 syringes flew from the surrounding forest, Anko was standing in the center of the field. She swerved to avoid them, but she noticed 3 explosive notes wrapped around them. As they exploded, she cursed, "Shit." A broken log lay on the ground as the smoke cleared. Menma charged out onto the field, chakra scalpels activated, and charged at the now exposed Anko in a taijutsu match. He swung a glowing palm at Anko, who dodged and retaliated with a high kick to the head. He ducked beneath the kick and sprang up in a backwards cartwheel, kicking Anko in the chin in the process. As he rose to his feet, he jabbed his scalpel into Anko's exposed throat. But before he could get near her throat, she kneed him in the stomach and kicked him away. She turned around quickly and backhanded Lee, who was about to punch her in the back. Soon, she was countering Lee and Menma's taijutsu barrage. She smirked slightly and caught Lee and Menma's fists before spinning around and throwing them in opposite directions. "Not bad, Gakis, but you're 100 years too young to beat me in close combat." Menma and Lee's pained grimaces turned to smirks as a small smoke bomb near Anko's feet exploded. Purple smoke suddenly filled the field. Anko, who was in the middle of the blast, began coughing and felt her limbs becoming heavier. "That damn Gaki made a paralyzing poison that can affect me?" She coughed. She quickly used hand signals and a wind jutsu to push the poison away from her. Menma appeared in front of her as soon as she could see again, a syringe on each finger covered in chakra scalpels. She took out a kunai and channeled chakra into it to deflect Menma's needle jabs and slashes. She had to duck as Lee performed another leaf whirlwind on her back, and she had to jump out of the way as Menma slashed at her with his scalpels. Suddenly, she felt a shift in the air as she fluxed her chakra, and her 2 students vanished, and Lee's kick was about to strike her in the face, while Menma was nowhere to be found. She bowed down unnaturally to avoid Lee's kick and grabbed a small dart that was about to enter her neck from behind. Menma emerged from the woods with his gas mask on and a blowpipe protruding from a section of the mouthpiece that had previously been hidden behind his gas mask. Anko gave her 2 students a friendly smile. "Not bad, Gakis, but not enough to knock me out." Lee was about to charge her again when she pointed her arm at him and yelled, "Senejishu," and snakes wrapped around him and she dragged him into Menma, who was charging at her from behind. She chuckled a little before her eyes widened, her perception had shifted, and she felt like she was doing a handstand while looking up at the sky. "What a nice genjutsu," she smirked. She closed her eyes and deflected and blocked the attacks from her 2 students with sound while continuing to flux her chakra to remove the genjutsu. She opened her eyes as she dispelled the genjutsu and dodged her students' attacks before kicking them away. She smirked as she noticed them struggling to get up. What she wasn't expecting was Naruto's sudden yell of, "Now!" Yakumo had just finished a painting of Anko in the forest. I sealed a steel beam bind and infused chakra into the painting. Anko froze in the middle of the field when she noticed steel beams wrapped around her body. Menma and Lee both dashed to the bells. Anko, unable to break free from the true illusion, was unable to react as both bells were taken from her. She smirked as all three of her students smiled in front of her, while Lee and Menma rang the bells. Alright, you Gakis, Lee, and Menma have a bell, so it looks like Yakumo is going back to the academy, she said to all three of her students. Menma smirked as he cut his bell in half with his chakra scalpel and handed it to Yakumo. We were never told we couldn't split the bells, sensei. Furthermore, the purpose of this test is not to get the bells but to work together. Anko burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. I can't wait to see Kakashi's expression when he finds out that my students passed his important bell test. Menma, you were correct. The purpose of this test was to assess teamwork. I am very proud of all of you, my adorable little students. But for the time being, I must report the results to the Hokage. While I'm doing that, why don't you all treat yourselves to something nice for lunch? She poofed her way through a shunshin. The three genin members exchanged smiles. Lee was extolling the virtues of youth and how he had made Guy-sensei proud. Yakumo was overjoyed that she had proven her old sensei Kurenai wrong and had become a genin. Menma smirked to himself as he removed his gas mask. He was now a genin, 1 year ahead of his sister. He couldn't wait to show his former parents what he was capable of by defeating his sister. Why don't we go out for some sushi? If we all pitch in, we can get some of the good stuff, Menma suggested to his teammates. They all smiled again as they walked to his favorite sushi restaurant. Konoha Hokage meeting, 1 hour after the successful genin test. All of the Jonin senseis who had already tested their students entered the room to discuss their findings with their Hokage. When all of the senseis had gathered, the results were announced. Team 1 has failed. Team 2 has failed. Team 3 has failed. Team 4 has failed. Team 5 has failed. Team 6 has failed. Inoku Yamanaka, Choju Akamichi, and Shiori Nara from Team 7 passed. Pakura Aburame, Hibiki Izunaka, and Tojiro from Team 8 passed. Team 9. Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma passed, Anko said. Team 10. Mito Gecko, Neji Hyuga, and Tenten passed, Hayato finally said as he walked forward. Minato smiled. 4 teams had passed this year, 1 more than the usual number of students to graduate. He also noticed that Team 9 had gotten away. He was aware that the bell test had been administered to that team, and he was eager to learn how they fared. Thank you for all of your efforts. I'll see the senseis from the previous teams here tomorrow for your first D-rank assignments. Please allow Anko to remain behind for a few seconds. As they left the room, everyone nodded and looked at Anko puzzledly. Minato selected Team 9's files. I wanted to know what you thought of this team. It is uncommon for a bell test to pass. The bell test was notorious for having the most failures. As a result, it was only available to the team with the rookie and kunoichi of the year. Anko gave a nod. Yes, Hokage-sama, I believe this team has the potential to be a formidable fighting force in the future. Lee and Menma kept me guessing with their taijutsu and poisons, while Yakumo kept me pinned down with their genjutsu. If I had been high chunin or even low jonin, I might have lost the battle rather than just the bells. Minato appeared surprised. After all, it's unusual to see a genin team with so much potential. When he looked at the folders, he couldn't help but feel proud of Menma, though he wasn't sure why. He returned Anko's smile and said, "Thank you Anko-san, I'll see you tomorrow to hand out your first D ranks. Can't wait to see the looks on the Gakis' faces when they first do D ranks." Anko laughed evilly. She continued to chuckle evilly as she exited the building, scaring the people who passed through it to death. Konoha Hokage's office, 1 day after the genin test, Menma Pav. Team 9 and their sensei awaited their first mission as a group. They were all ecstatic about their first mission. They were in front of the Chunin, who assigned D and C missions. The Chunin rummaged through the D-rank scrolls until he found a mission. Team 9, the Daiwaimo's wife's cat Tora has gone missing. It is your responsibility to find it. The Chunin was deadpanned by all of the genins on Team 9, including Lee. Menma sighed, having seen all of the genin teams doing meaningless tasks around the village. They returned to the office after several hours of chasing the damn cat, heavily battle-wounded by the smug-looking cat in Yakumo's arms. After they finished the mission and examined the remaining scrolls, the Chunin chuckled slightly. Well, our only missions for the day are to weed Miss Haruka's garden and repaint an elder's house. Outside the room, they could hear a commotion and a woman's shrill voice. No. Tora. And catching Tora again, sighed the Chunin. As they accepted another D rank, Team 9 sighed as one. Field 9 Training, Konoha, 1 month after Team 9's first D rank. It had been a month of hell for Team 9. They would constantly train with Anko in the morning and then do boring D-rank missions for the rest of the day. Anko did not summon them to Training Ground 9 until after their 40th D-rank mission. Anko was up against her team. Okay, Gakis, we're off on our first C-rank mission tomorrow. I want you all to get a good night's sleep and be well rested for the mission. We won't be back for another week or two. As they left to prepare for their first real mission, the 3 genins looked excited and nodded. Menma arrived at his apartment, which he had purchased with money earned from D-rank missions. He paused in front of the mirror before wiping the makeup off his cheeks, revealing 3 whisker-like marks. He had no idea why he was getting these grades. Only his sister, the Kyuubi container, bore these marks. However, he would keep these marks hidden until he figured out what was going on. He sighed, knowing that the Chunin exams were only 2 months away. He is aware that he will be unable to take the exams. He is aware that Minato would never allow his daughter to miss the first Chunin exams after she graduates. He was in luck because the next Chunin examinations were in Kumo. He could easily justify not taking the exams this time. He also deduced that Neji's team would not participate due to the Hyuga's history with Kumo. He grimaced, knowing it was only a matter of time before he faced his sister. And at the end, he'd be the one standing over her, exacting his vengeance on that man's daughter in front of the entire world. From Menma's mindscape. Menma's mental landscape had evolved into a large pond surrounded by trees. 2 glowing red eyes appeared in the center of the water, slowly taking shape from the water. Finally, a small fox with 1 tail emerged from the water and smirked, the chakra he had injected into the child having finally allowed his consciousness in. He had injected some of his chakra into the other kid, Naruto something, before being sealed in the brat Shio. He'd used that tiny chakra to encircle anyone of his blood and command them to ignore him. This enabled his plan to be successful. The Jubi could never be revived without his consciousness in the seal, unless both his consciousness and chakra were in the Gedo Mazo statue. It was just an added bonus that he could exact his revenge on Kushina for all the years he had spent chained to a giant moon in his mindscape. He mocked his small body, knowing that he would grow quickly due to the excess chakra in his new host's body. However, he will not be fully recovered until Naruto reaches the age of 16. He regretted making the kid's life so difficult, but deception was required to defeat Madara. However, away from his parents, the child had grown strong, and with his chakra, they could train to defeat Madara while Shio served as bait. He knew Naruto would be a better host because only he knew he was the Asura reincarnation, not Shio. He chuckled and returned to the pond, knowing that it wasn't yet time to reveal himself to Naruto. Or Menma.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.